Alright, before the video starts, I just want to go ahead and say that for the first about 15 minutes of this video, I'm gonna sound dead and I'm gonna sound like my mom just died and my dog just died and my dad just died. But I get more talkative. I just really wanted to pace myself, but then it ended up sounding like I only got like 1 hour of sleep and I haven't slept in 5 days. But yeah, and enjoy the video. I do not like Secret of the Mimic. Now let me preface this video with, I am not any sort of professional writer or media analyst, nor a game developer, obviously, but this video is coming from the perspective of a disgruntled FNAF fan that has been here since day one. Yes, I am one of those. I love FNAF 1 through Custom Night, and Help Wanted through the Mimic can eat shit. I mean, right after I played this game, my friend went to the mental hospital and I got a stomach bug, and both of those things were much more engaging to me than this FNAF game. Now, I don't automatically hate any modern FNAF content or 100% of the games when Steelwool picked it up. I was pretty excited to see what they had in store for my favorite horror franchise, and I wound up leaving the funhouse very disappointed. It was less of a funhouse and more of a toxic relationship with an ex-girlfriend. Only instead of blindly believing my ex-girlfriend, I kept believing that some way, somehow, the next game would get us on track. And the next game, and the next game, and the next, and you get the point. I do like some aspects or even key moments in the modern FNAF games, I really do. I love Vanny, and I super wish that we actually got proper character screen time for her, and I hate this stupid BS mimic stuff going on. Either reboot the franchise or don't, you know? How about instead of Burntrap being the Mimic for a non-canonical ending or having the Mimic exist in the first place at all, why not just make Vanny a copycat killer? Why make up this elaborate timeline where the previous games sorta kinda aren't canon, and also there is a virus mimicking William Afton that possesses Vanny? There is just so much course correcting and mental gymnastics and extra steps in these new FNAF games that I am just sick of it all, honestly. Gone are the days of my simple Foxy plush and Bonnie toy. Now we have whatever the fuck this is. Nevertheless, I am a FNAF fan and I must keep up with the series, whether it's something I like or not. I also wanted to preface this video with something very important that I would like you to keep in mind. Initially, this video was going to be titled something like, Secret of the Mimic is painfully mediocre, or something like that. But the more I wrote the script, the more I wanted to make the distinction between the game as a playable experience versus how it fits together as a puzzle piece for the rest of the lore and story. So let me just say, I think it is a totally solid and fun game. It has a lot to like about it as a game standing on its own 2 legs. I, however, was very detached from it going through the game, being constantly reminded and distracted by all the lore decisions or characters that I did not like or I thought strolled down a bad path, which would mainly be a product of the previous couple games and books, which makes me heavily dislike my experience with the game. I would rather this game have been a side story anthology spin-off of the franchise like Into the Pit instead of a mainline game. By the way, if you aren't caught up with the timeline and new games, especially Secret of the Mimic, I would recommend maybe watching Daco or Raito summaries on the game. They're my goats and pretty much all the FNAF news I follow. When I think about FNAF, I feel like I have DID and have like 5 different versions of the same timeline talking to me in my head. Not to mention all the stuff I forget about. There is way too much of that to store in my tiny little brain. Also, depending on how soon I get the video equipment needed for this video can come out anywhere between a couple weeks after the game's release to a couple months. We'll see, I suppose. But anyways, let's get into it. I don't like Secret of the Mimic. So let's start off with one thing that I actually like about the game. This isn't gonna go in chronological order based upon the events of the game, so I'm just gonna spitball some long-winded tangents. Anyhow, the gameplay itself feels really nice from a technical standpoint and makes sense within the context of the environment. I love that you have to maneuver through your objective points in the mansion to avoid the Mimic. I think it's really awesome that the Mimic as a character conceptually is so versatile that he can just get into any sort of suit laying around, so you won't really expect him. At least, for maybe about the first section. I think conceptually this is really cool and the Mimic can be a cool enemy, though he was kinda wasted. The whole gimmick with the Mimic is that he could be anywhere. His entire character is built around with and amplified by the fear of the unknown. However, his gimmick gets stale kinda quickly when the element of surprise isn't such a surprise anymore. I feel like he doesn't even use the differing suits to his advantage, he kinda just appears chasing you with a random skin on, essentially. And let me just say, I will take this map and playstyle over the big-ass square box of the map that we got in Security Breach any day of the week. I mean, Security Breach was supposed to be a stealth horror game, but You might as well be playing in a fucking acre of open land. There isn't much between you and the animatronics, which can just teleport to you if alerted by staff bots whenever they feel like it.
Oh my! Oh my god! Wow!
So yes, Secret of the Mimic is a huge improvement in quality overall, and it should get much praise for being a fun and interactive stealth horror game. At first we see the Mimic when he introduces himself, and it's implied that he could be anyone in the costumes in the room with you. But then later he's just Jackie no matter what, he's just Big Top no matter what, he's just Tiger Suit no matter what, etc. Imagine if the Mimic were a built-in mechanic into something like Sister Location, for example. All of these animatronics are normal, but there is one endoskeleton lurking around, so watch your back moving through the facility, as it could be any one of them at random, at any given time, and you genuinely don't know which one. Now take this character and apply it to Secret of the Mimic. What do you have to work with? Mostly scripted sequential character deaths that the Mimic will 100% be in the same order. The idea of the Mimic hiding in one of the 5 animatronic suits in the same one-story building as me sounds far scarier than basically a multi-leveled security breach, but with just one character. And honestly, the Mimic doesn't even feel like one enemy in the game. And obviously, yeah, from an in-universe perspective, that's how it's supposed to feel. But what I mean is, really what's the difference between being in Monty's section of Security Breach, jumping to Roxy's section, jumping to Chica's section, and then in this game, jumping from Jackie's section, to Big Top section, to Dolly's section? The Mimic doesn't feel like one creepy entity that could be anywhere, lurking around and stealing the identity of other characters. I want this one animalistic robot to feel like one animalistic robot. He is saved in order to be different predetermined animatronic NPCs that may as well be completely separate entities introduced one at a time and lasting for like a few minutes each. Most of these characters have wasted potential as each of them appear for like a 2-minute scripted chase sequence. That's the formula for each character, by the way. Remember when Jackie was in quite a bit of marketing leading us to believe she would play a decently big role? Well, just JKing, because she's here for a second in a Poppy's Playtime chase scene and then you escape her and that's the end of seeing her. Big Top, oh, he goes after you and you escape him in a chase scene. Oh, by the way, just wanted to say, the chase scene of Big Top ends with a scripted event of both you, the player, and Big Top falling into a dark pit, and then it cuts to black, boots up from a loading screen, and only shows the aftermath of the fall. Steelwool really couldn't even show him eating shit in a cutscene or something? Imagine if in Security Breach we didn't see Chica getting shattered or anything, we just press the button to the garbage chute, and then it cuts to black and fades in on Chica's broken body in the span of like 3 seconds. How anticlimactic. Now a bit ago I mentioned my displeasure with the multiple chase scenes in this game, and I know someone is gonna be pissed off at what I'm saying, and they're gonna comment something like, "Bro found out you can run from people in horror games," or something like that. But let me elaborate. This entire game just feels like a FNAF reskin of Poppy Playtime. Jackie's segment is essentially completely scripted. She finds you in this mailroom, she throws something through the wall, so you go down through the hole she created, and you escape. I wouldn't even have a problem with this sort of use and throw away the character playstyle if the levels featuring them were longer and added more to the game or explored the character more. Like I said, Jackie, Big Top, Dolly, all of them are completely disposable quote-unquote bosses that you beat in like 10 seconds after aggravating them. Playing this FNAF game is like a video game equivalent of watching a NASCAR race. Oh man, I wonder what those cars are gonna do now. Oh, left turn, left turn! And hey, maybe I'm completely wrong and I'll get schooled by someone like Rytoast or Fiznom. But this is just my personal gripes with how the playstyle appeals or doesn't appeal to me. I'm sure people will eat this stuff up and then ask for seconds, but this is just unreasonably irking me. I'm not asking for like a Sans or Dark Souls length or difficulty boss fight, of course, but it feels like such an empty calorie playstyle to me. I have a few friends that enjoyed the game and that really like it, and that's okay, and I can totally see why. I just don't like it that much, and I'm trying to explain why. And no, I am not proposing that every FNAF game should just be an image-stretched click team game. I'm just not a fan of this Poppy Playtime cut-and-paste playstyle. A lot of games to me feel more like interactive movies now rather than video games, which isn't always a bad thing depending on what you're playing. For example, I think the interactive movie style of play suits Until Dawn very, very well. It's like a horror movie where you yell at a dumb person making a dumb decision, except you can choose if that character makes a dumb decision, or you can save them from that fate, and I think that works really well in its favor. I'm just confused on what I'm supposed to feel. I don't feel quite accomplished or feel like it's earned when I beat the bosses, and I hardly have any time to get to know the characters that the Mimic pretends to be. Imagine if instead of a single chase scene with Jackie where we lose her and never see her in the game again within the span of like 2 minutes, we spend time doing something with her or around her that's more challenging, like a segment similar to the daycare in Security Breach, for example. Spend some time with some of the characters doing things with them, maybe even bonding with some of them before they get controlled by the Mimic, not knowing when he chooses to come and take over. Also, the secret item and inventory system is pretty cool. It's nothing groundbreaking and it's akin to Security Breach's system of opening prize boxes to get a collectible, but it's still a welcome mechanic that I don't have gripes with. It incentivizes you to collect them as you can get different endings based on what you collect and what you do, as is par for the course for most recent indie horror titles. But it is effective and I have zero complaints. It's not too attainable, so you do have to go out of your way a bit to go and find these collectibles, but it's not so hard that you have to think of insane shit like using the tiles in the office of FNAF 3 as a keypad. Nothing to write home about, but I like that you can also collect mail throughout the map to read letters like from FNAF AR for lore tidbits, but also the way in which you collect these things is pretty cool, I have to admit. It's like a PC system in Pokemon, except instead of storing Pokemon in a machine to ensure their never-ending torment and loneliness, you store items in the inventory machine so the game can count your discoveries, and you can read about each one. I think it's not only cool that you have an in-universe way of collecting these things instead of just a PNG flashing on the screen saying you got something, but also that you are allowed to read up on each of the objects and potentially learn something in the larger lore and continuity as a result. It's essentially the same mechanic from Security Breach, but they added that extra layer of polish and dazzle to it that perfects it. You can also acquire different rolls of film for you to actually play. Some of these are better than the actual game itself. Mostly I'm talking about the dog jester. He seems so creepy in that commercial for the film roll you find of him. But when you see his character model in game, it's just kinda Like, yeah, it's not sunshine and rainbows, but it's not very unsettling. At least not to the degree as the aforementioned commercial he was featured in. Okay, so you've heard me compare this game to Poppy Playtime a little bit, which I believe is a fair comparison. However, I definitely don't hate this art style for this FNAF game. I do 100% prefer the still grungy atmosphere of the first few FNAF games, but if FNAF had to go mainstream with the kiddies and have a more polished and modern style, I think this one fits it pretty well. I think it's still too sanitized for my liking, but I can at least appreciate the toyetic feel of the characters since they are of child entertainment. I think that works for this game, especially considering we're essentially playing in a toy factory. Family fun for grown-ups and kids alike is a staple of Fazbear Entertainment after all. However, I think it can lean so heavily into this that it falls flat on its face sometimes. The Foxy puppet looks great, the prototype animatronics look pretty good, the helper couple is pretty cute and not a bad idea at all. But then there's just very generic and bland mascot horror designs like most of the mascot suits the Mimic controls. Jackie, in my opinion, looks pretty stupid and not at all like a FNAF character. Dolly to me looks jarring and not in an endearing Uncanny Valley sort of way. She just looks like she doesn't belong in a FNAF game, period. And if you want to make the argument that she just looks like Circus Baby or that style of sister location robot, I would then say that I still don't like that, since the implication would be that William stole those designs from Edwin, which I am just not on board with. Not to mention, I never ever liked the giant-ass DJ Music Man or Big Top stuff. They're incredibly lame and ill-fitting for this series. And when paired next to the roster of other characters, they just look like a gray loot in a pile of gold. We're in a gaming franchise where we can have robot bears with top hats, purple bunnies with flying Vs, wolves in 80s glam rock attire wielding a keytar, and yet somehow this obnoxiously generic designed spider robot man keeps appearing like he means literally anything to anyone. He looks like a FNAF World character. I do like the graphics and overall style of the game, it's visually appealing, but I just think it's wasted on stuff like that. So I did mention the game felt toyetic, which I generally like. However, I think some things are just kind of off here and there. Like sometimes it's too toyetic and silly. Like the big ass comically large red buttons for like the trash chute and elevator repairs. And yeah, I get this was meant to be more so for the players of the game and not really thinking about it in universe too much, but it irks me. Sometimes this game has random ass feats of technology that are just completely fabricated sci-fi designs with a 70s skin put over it. I just think the Poppy's playtimification should be studied. And I don't mean the whole game is like this, by the way, but when it happens, it kinda distracts me. But I mean, you look up pictures of the 70s and stuff like this comes up. You know what doesn't come up? This bullshit. I hate the spring locks. They are so positively goofy and embarrassing in this game. I don't mean goofy in the sense that they make me giggle, but like, they make me facepalm and I gain secondhand embarrassment. The spring lock suits in this game are just small potato mechs. That shit really grinds my gears. The suit builds remind me of that scrappy little walnut from that one bad Pacific Rim sequel that barely anybody saw. This whole time in the franchise, I was under the impression that spring-lock suits were ill-fitting regular endoskeleton-sized suits that employees could barely squeeze into, making it very dangerous. But nah, they started off as this big round mini-sized mech suit that you can climb into the tummy of, and I just think that's kinda stupid. And yes, I understand that these are the prototype spring-lock suits, so they may not be exactly the same as referenced later in the games, but the suit is in this game regardless, and I just think they're ridiculous.
Hey guys, Editing Jack here. I just wanted to go ahead and cut in about what I was talking about with the spring locks. I still don't like the spring locks in this game and how they're represented, but I went on this tangent about how they're big and bulky as if it looks that much bigger than just like Springtrap's suit. It's visually not so much bigger at all, but the reason I was claiming that it wasn't as ill-fitting or that it was just too like big and potato-y is because you can literally open up the tummy and crawl inside, which gave me the illusion that it's much bigger than it is, but obviously it's physically not. But it's the way that it's executed and presented that makes it feel that way, and that's why I don't like it, and that's where my criticism mainly lies.
You literally just Iron Man suit up and power up into a FNAF Hulkbuster. Just add Jarvis in the mask while you're at it. Climbing into the spring-lock suit like this in a FNAF game is the FNAF equivalent of when the MCU just stopped giving a shit about Iron Man and just made him have nanotechnology. I also want to bring the jump scares to our attention real quick. They're not very good. Ever since I want to say Pizzeria Sim, the jump scares have sucked so bad. Which is kinda crazy, since that's like this franchise's whole shtick is jump scares. That's like if Subnautica had another sequel and they made the ocean like lollipops and cotton candy. It just doesn't work and it's not scary anymore. The chases leading up to the climax of the jump scare is scarier. FNAF 1 had great jump scare animations with Freddy and the gang getting all up in your face, loud as hell like an old boomer who doesn't understand boundaries. Even with the exception of Foxy, who only peeks into your office when he jump scares you, there's that instant insane adrenaline pump straight to your fucking heart when you see him running down that hall to hastily shove his little body through that cramped doorway. Even that is a good jump scare. FNAF 4 was really effective with them as well, incentivizing the players to lean in closely and listen, and if you fail what you're supposed to be doing, then you get an up-close and personal screech in your ear and a maw in your face. Jump scares as of Help Wanted have absolutely sucked. It was like this for Help Wanted, Help Wanted 2, and Security Breach. It's really underwhelming in Security Breach too, especially since that game had a big-ass open space map, so jump scares don't even make you jump. The thing that was sorta scary about it was being chased and feeling and hearing the loud, heavy metallic footsteps get more loud and intense. And then it has the worst climax. It's pretty bad in this game too. The jump scares are god-awful and have the joy sucked out of them. FNAF 1 jump scares to me were peak and well-implemented animations with the use of that one chick screaming from Inseminoid. I think that was really creative and fun, and I kinda don't think it's ever been that good since. In this game, the jump scare sound is just some generic loud noise that sounds like a treble boosted feedback from an amp or something. It's just loud squeaky noise pollution and it doesn't feel very creative at all. And also the animations just weren't scary or well implemented in my opinion, and every time you die, we're greeted with some camera film burning effect, to constantly remind us that we're in the 70s. Imagine if every time you died in Security Breach, your screen fades out into a neon border outlining the screen and it says, "The 80s are back." That's more of a nitpick if anything, by the way. I just thought it was annoying. But yeah, I hate to keep comparing this game to OG FNAF, but it's just not what it used to be on basically every account. Very disappointed.
If the joy of creation can do it and can exceed with a really good jump scare with Ignited Bonnie, then I'm sure this AAA game can do it.
I sorta had some trouble deciding how I would ration the rest of this video into chapters, so I think the best way to do this here is to have the characters and lore together, since I think it's super hard to talk about one individual from the other. So the characters. Oh boy, what do I think about the characters? Well, as I'm sure you can guess, I don't really like him. My favorite character is one that doesn't even have like 5 lines, and I feel like he shouldn't be in the game at all. That character is Arnold. Besides Andy Field, I feel like Arnold has the best performance in the game, yet I don't even think he should have anything to perform. Kellen Goff voices Arnold in the game, and I'm not gonna lie, he kills it. Arnold is the character we play as, which is really fucking funny considering you instantly forget you're even playing as someone other than yourself. The reason I keep saying that I don't think Arnold should be in the game is because he says like 3 funny things at the start of the game when you're on radio with dispatch, and I don't believe he even says anything else for the rest of the game until the ending. And not even in super reactive scenarios. If you're gonna give the person we play as a personality and a voice, why would you then abandon that and give the character less than 10 lines? He talks less than Master Chief in the first Halo game. There's not even like screams or grunting or effort noises utilized to remind us that we are in fact playing as someone with a real identity. Arnold is a really well acted and funny character. I mean, seriously, Scott has always had this sort of deadpan kind of humor sprinkled into FNAF, and I think Kellen delivers on that super well as Arnold. But why would you add that dash of flavor at the start and then literally never use it again? It's like cooking a meal for a family gathering, but you only season the one spoonful of food to taste the meal, and then roll out the food that's just bland and unforgettable. I seriously find it so strange how they decided to give you a character, but then give him a completely blank slate for the rest of the game with his personality extracted. Oh, and by the way, the Fazbear Dispatch voice is voiced by Andy Field, the voice actor for Hand Unit, and later the go-to voice for any speech module or narrator tutorial in the FNAF franchise. And I gotta say, can we please give this motherfucker a break? Like, don't get me wrong, I love Andy Field and his work as Hand Unit, but for the love of God, can we please let this dude rest? I'm not sure why the modern FNAF sphere is so scared of having literally any new voice actor that isn't Andy Field or Kellen Goff. The Dispatch guy is pretty well acted as expected, but did we really need this voice appearing in a game set in the late 70s when he's milked everywhere else in the future of the franchise? And yes, I get it. I know one of you is thinking, well, it just goes to show the greed of Fazbear Entertainment. They stole this man's voice and use it for eternity. But there's only so much in-universe explanations you can just throw at the wall to stick until I get tired of the same slop every time, like Bob being fed in Monsters vs. Aliens. The addition of the Dispatch guy, which I'm simply going to refer to as Andy from now on, is guilty of the Stormtrooper effect. What I mean by the Stormtrooper effect is essentially, as you watch more modern Star Wars creations like currently produced TV shows, movies, or even older comics, when they take place in the past, like Rogue One for example, they add a shit ton of different Stormtrooper variants and classes that just never existed before. It's not objectively bad, but it's just so damn jarring when, in the original trilogy, we only see these basic white Stormtroopers like 90% of the time. But in newer stuff like Rogue One, they add things like Shore Troopers and Death Troopers, things we have never seen present or interacted with in the old material. So how I relate this back to this game is Steelwool keeps retroactively adding or changing so many different things early on in the timeline that very clearly is just a new creator of the lore adding in their newer gen characters into the old timeline so that it can seem more coherent or broadly put together, but it is anything but coherent and effective. It feels like those Instagram memes where it's like, I just put my OC in the show, can you spot them? And the joke is the OC is the most blatantly fake and distracting character in the clip. It's so hard to just look at FNAF 2 and think, oh yeah, by this point in the timeline, the Mimic escaped a few years ago and a wacky toy house manor fucking exploded when this Faz technician was taking orders from the original Hand Unit guy. It just frustrates me so much. Steelwool is so scared of branching off from what they built in the franchise that they just rewrite history essentially. Why not just stick to the basics? Why not just have the game include strictly original legacy characters or characters closely related to them? Like, I don't know, if you wanted to add characters that appeared later in the timeline, maybe you could add a character that vaguely resembles Funtime Freddy in the sense that he's just a traveling circus bear with funky colors. Then we can connect the dots and go, oh hey, this is a super early demo suit for what would become Funtime Freddy down the line. But now let's just add DJ Music Man and put him in a dingy 70s beige skin. That was a terrible decision. And I'm not against newer characters like Insecurity Breach making their first appearance here like Monty. I think that's totally fine and I think it fits, but I think it just gets to a point when it's something like Big Top and then Roxy with Foxy's pirate crew, but we never see her again in the franchise for some reason. And if Roxy was on Foxy's pirate crew, then why not put her in FNAF 2 instead of the Mangle? It just doesn't make much sense to me. I want to shift my point now more towards the new characters in this game. Before we move on to the more important central characters like the Murrays, I just want to go ahead and knock out a few of the animatronics we see a little bit of. Not much to say about Jackie since I already shared a tidbit earlier, but Dolly and Big Top are very bizarre, outlandish characters that don't fit the bill for FNAF or even this game in the FNAF universe. I think they added Big Top just cause the fucker was in Security Breach and the human nurse robot is just so bizarre. Not to mention it pisses me off since it's like a sister location animatronic but cranked up to 10. So it's just this super futuristic human robot that looks ridiculous. And back when sister location came out, I already kinda had this thing in my mind where I was like, wow, this is unnecessarily futuristic for the 1980s. And now I feel that sentiment more than ever since this game takes place in the decade before that. I just think it gets to a point, man, and this game is that point. We should be at humble beginnings, baby steps with just simple slip into, slip out of mascot suits, not giant Spider-Man and the futuristic nurse robot. I also want to talk about the biggest thing in this game that made me roll my eyes and facepalm while I was seeing this shit. This is something that solidified the whole Poppy Playtime Garden of Ban comparison in my head, which is when the manor is crumbling and about to explode. There's all these stupid little fucking robots who are just made of little household items, and they just remind me of those goofy Decepticons from Transformers 2. They're dumb and goofy and not what I thought would ever become of FNAF, and honestly, stupid stuff like this, especially in a prequel, absolutely feels like a slap in the face. On the flip side, however, Mr. and Mrs. Helpful are really cool, and they're kinda cute. They do engage in the Stormtrooper effect, however, since they're obviously supposed to be the precursor to Helpy, but I don't mind them, and I think conceptually they're pretty cute. I believe in universe they are both representative of and voiced by Edwin and Fiona, which I think was adorable. Also, let's talk about Sun and Moon for a second here. First, I just want to say that I like the moon in the basement, but not for the reason Steelwool is probably leaning towards. I think Steelwool didn't really think that far ahead, and they just simply imply that the moon guy in the basement is the mimic in the moon suit. However, there's a pretty cool fan theory floating around that the moon guy is actually a trapped and starved MCM employee, and I think that makes much more narrative sense and is much cooler than it just being the mimic again. Essentially, you can find some messages in the mail, and there's a message from an employee at the manor who is begging for someone to notice them being trapped with something in the basement. And they state that they are very hungry. Now, from just the game standpoint, it probably is just the mimic, but I think it would be much more narratively interesting for this moon costume to be a starving employee gone crazy. I think that would be really, really cool, and would give us a break from all that evil, corrupted AI and copious amounts of dead kids' souls possessing robots by throwing this completely unexpected curveball that isn't directly related to the characters or plot, but it is absolutely part of the cause and effect of everything surrounding it. Anyway, that moon out of the way, let's talk about how apparently the sun and moon represents Edwin and Fiona. Okay, so throughout the game, Sun and Moon illustrate the dynamic with the characters, Moon being Edwin and Sun being Fiona. Now, the problem that I have with this isn't the symbolism and analogous storytelling, but it's the fact that once again, for the millionth unnecessary time, they are taking the new characters of the game and retroactively including them in the oldest part of the timeline and over-explaining their origin or role in the story that has nothing to do with these characters 50 years later. I truly don't think a single person in the entire fandom needed an explanation about the creation of the Sun and Moon daycare attendant in 1979. Or then again, maybe there is. There's a lot of people that go crazy for them. Those two seemingly useless animatronics in the Pizzaplex did not need this huge role in parallel to the man who started it all and his wife 50 years ago. We truly do not need all this random inclusion and over-explaining in the lore. It reminds me of that scene in the Solo movie where he's like, "What's your name, kid?" And then Han Solo is like, I only have a first name, it's Han." And then the Stormtrooper guy is like, Han Solo. Like, that's how the writing feels in a lot of these games, and it messes with me a lot. We don't need to know that Sun and Moon represent the original founder and his dead wife when the Sun and Moon animatronics don't play that much of an important role in universe or even have a direct tie to Edwin or Fiona. It just seems like a strange inclusion to me. A lot of the writing and decision making for Security Breach and onward just remind me of how Star Wars Episode 8 was. So when the 9th movie rolled around, it spent most of its time course correcting and expanding on things that we really didn't need anymore. This game on its own two legs is a very solid video game, but it's just tied down yet tossed around at the same time by all these different notions of cleaning up the nightmare that was Security Breach and Help Wanted. That being said, let's talk more about Fiona and Edwin aside from their Sun and Moon counterparts. I'm a little mad. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think these characters are horrible or anything, and I don't even think that they're like cardboard cutouts, but they're also like boring sometimes and sort of cringy on the dialogue's behalf. I did not expect Edwin to be a twink. That's not bad or a legitimate criticism, nor is Steelwool at fault, but I was 100% brainwashed by the whole "my name is Edwin" stuff. But yeah, I don't really like Edwin. I especially hate that once more, he is a sudden addition to previously established lore, completely rewriting established storylines, or just adding unnecessary fat to it that just ends up being more hassle than it's worth. I mean, come on, really? Did anyone ask for there to be a third business partner in Fazbear Entertainment that would birth the animatronics we know and love today? Like, seriously, is anyone happy that they just added this schmuck in the game on a whim? So now it's implied that Henry and William actually stole everything from Edwin? This guy that we are just now hearing about? Absolutely not. I think that's what makes me the most pissed off about this game. Steelwool just cannot keep their grubby little paws off of old and pre-existing material, and it rattles me to my core. It is so displeasing. The notion that Edwin was actually the original creator of pretty much everything we know and love to this franchise, when he wasn't even a feasible concept back then, really upsets me. It feels like Edwin was that one slacker in your science class's group project that somehow ended up getting all the credit when he contributed literally nothing of value, and you kinda just stand there patting him on the shoulder. I think it really detracts from the brilliance of William and Henry as businessmen and entrepreneurs. It seemed to me that Henry was the businessman focused on starting and keeping the brand alive, while William was the one to design and create all the characters that weren't just Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. Though they wound up being mortal enemies, it seemed that maybe they had a good dynamic. Then that was just kinda taken away by slipping the secret third character into the plot, stating that actually, both characters didn't really have that much achievements, as they just stole everything and left, like a divorced abusive mother taking home the child support money and spending it on makeup and nails. Sorry, I got a little personal there. But yeah, not at all a fan of how this game is just rearranging the lore, and it's not just a problem I have with Steel Wool, but with lots of modern studios touching on pre-existing material. They just can't seem to leave it untouched. They want to have it their way, and that makes me upset. Also, Edwin is such a nerd! Obviously, I'm mostly taking the piss, but like, just compared to the picture of William and Henry I have in my mind, compared to Edwin is just night and day. William Afton is like this cold-blooded killer who is also a mad scientist basically, and Henry Emily had this banger-ass monologue at the end of the core games closing everything off as him and William had a final goodbye in a blaze of glory. And that was just so cool. And then we have audio tapes of Edwin going, "Oh man, Henry and William are up to no good. Whatever am I to do?" And like, I don't know, he's not terrible, but like, when I hear this man say anything, I finally get what delusional women on Instagram mean when they say, "He gives me the ick." I also just truly don't think the acting does this character justice in the game. And by the way, it's 100% the fault of the voice direction and not at all on the voice actor for Edwin. With what he is given, he sounds fantastic, and I can tell that he has the actual acting chops to do cool things. But like, when we hear the audio tape of him and the mimic in the same room while he's dying, for example, it is just very underwhelming. He's like, "M2, gah, please, I was always gonna fix you."
I can't move. I can't feel my legs.
Like, it seems like they were going for disturbing, but it really truly wasn't. The delivery fell flat and I was not disturbed. All I could think about was how he sounded like William Afton getting spring-locked in the first FNAF movie, where he sounded like he was getting a very mild tummy ache. This man should have fear in his voice, and should be wailing in pain and pleading for his life. The only part I liked about that specific tape was when the mimic was speaking to Edwin as himself, and he was like, "I can't right now, sport. See if mom can help you. I'm busy right now." I thought that was really cool, but the whole tape itself could have been executed way better. I will say, however, I do like one thing about Edwin as a narrative piece and individual character that I actually like quite a lot and I'm super appreciative of. I love that he's actually not a one-note character. I hesitate to call him multifaceted because he's really not that deep of a character, but he certainly isn't a goody two-shoes either. I really like that about him.
We live in a day and age where in modern media, especially movies and TV shows, companies are so damn afraid of creating characters of moral complexity. Recently, it's always that a main character has to be perfect and objectively virtuous with no room for development or nuance. Secret of the Mimic did squash this problem really well with Edwin. We can tell for the most part that he's just a chill normal dude who likes creating. However, that is also his undoing, as he is an extreme workaholic, neglecting both his wife and kids, which would eventually unfurl into a butterfly effect that would end his own life. I just admire how this game is able to make us kinda care for him and understand that deep down, he's a good dude, but is insanely flawed and not anywhere near perfect. In a world of Mary Sues and Gary Stews, I'm at least glad that there's a couple of Edwins out there. While we're on the topic of audio logs, by the way, I just wanted to say that collecting audio tapes or logs in video games for extra content and lore explanations is like one of my favorite game mechanics, ever. But some of these tapes, man, just scratch the wrong parts of my brain. Like when Darwin Watterson used the wrong side of the scrubby sponge. I just hate the over-explanation in these audio logs. It is so goddamn annoying. Like, I get it, your wife and kid are dead, bro. And you made the mimic and it was difficult to put the pieces together. We get it. It pissed me off so much when that one specific audio recording played and Edwin was like completely talking to himself in the second person, saying things like, "Remember, Edwin, they are out to get you. You can't trust them, Edwin. Remember that."
Edwin, never forget, they are behind it. Don't trust them. Never tell them. They want to destroy you. Dad was right.
Brother, no one talks to themselves like that. Like, you could convey this information in some mail or secrets or even just a better audio tape that has more organic flowing dialogue that would make me feel more sympathetic, because as it stands, I just see Edwin as a cringe theater kid giving his monologue to the class. It feels uninspired and spoon-fed to us. It's really annoying. And even if the original books introducing the Mimic didn't exist, I'd still share the same sentiment, but I think I would be much more lenient on the exposition. Tell me, what did it serve releasing like 50% of the story of the Mimic in a sorta kinda canon book before putting it into its own mainstream game and DLC? Did you really need to prematurely release the core background to the game into a book a year or two before it came out? I could understand if it were just the book that existed of the Mimic or just the game, since many books of varying canonicity serve to fill in some blanks and explain things within the game's timeline. But if you were gonna do that with the Mimic, why the fuck did you feel the need to then expand on that 100% in the Mimic's own video game? The whole point of those books are to provide missing information in a universe that parallels the games, but aren't the games. So what the hell was the point to writing a decent origin story to the Mimic, but then just creating an entire game for it sooner down the line that did not only spoon-feed you the backstory of the lore in-game, but also expanded on it in present time with varying different endings? As I said before, a lot of the books serve to just fill in some blanks or vaguely explain certain rules that we as FNAF fans and theorists didn't previously understand. But if that were the case with the Mimic book, then why not just keep it a fucking book or a game? One of the two. That's like if when the Silver Eyes book was written, Scott 2 years later just decided to go ahead and release a full-length video game about the same premise with almost the same backstory, with like Charlie explaining what happened in an audio message the entire time. I mean, what if that happened with every other book? What if one story about the Lonely Freddy's was written and we were like, oh man, big implications guys, we got all we need. And then soon after, an entire fully explorable and interactable game came out about the exact same premise, basically completely nullifying the book's existence because the book isn't one-to-one the same continuity, but it has basically the same plot as the game. Then why the hell would we not just discard the book and only pay attention to the game if the book's intended purpose is to serve connections and fill holes to the game? It just doesn't make any sense to me, honestly, and I feel like we'd just be better off advancing in the timeline instead of backtracking to a story and character that just popped into existence that we already know through a book. That being said, I don't think Fiona was in the book, I don't recall, or at least she didn't play a huge role, so she's a newer addition to the game's timeline. And while we tackle the character Fiona, I also have a related bone to pick with Fall Fest. A wishbone, if you will. Also, I just wanted to say I wrote that a wishbone, if you will, line in my script, and I genuinely have no idea what the fuck I meant by that. But first, Fiona. She's aight. I mean, her and David are kinda just there. Fiona plays more of a role like closer towards the end of the game, and she's not a throwaway character by any means, but she's just not center stage. The focus on this game in terms of characterization is more towards Edwin. Also, before we do move on to Fiona and the other thing I wanted to talk about, I want to quickly mention Andy the dispatch guy right quick. I know, long-winded tangents. I feel like my script is like 5 different dialogue trees in a butterfly effect game, but anyhow, since I did mention Edwin was absolutely cringe in the way he presented and delivered his lines in the audio tapes, I just want to say that some of the lines for the dispatch guy were super dumb, especially when the Mimic takes over and pretends to be him. He's just so cartoonishly evil for some endoskeleton that seems to behave more like an erratic animal. Also, you would think the Mimic would mimic the dispatch guy and not just be like, yes, you'll be stuck here forever. Like, the whole point of the Mimic is to pretty much be that person, essentially, and I don't see where the dispatch guy was just like blatantly evil. It just seems off to me. Also, that one specific line where at the beginning Andy said something like, be careful, there's an endoskeleton in there with homicidal tendencies. Like, dude, this writing and dialogue is so cheesy and, like, not in a campy 80s horror movie way. It just sucks and it's, like, blatantly written for children. And since we're about to tackle Fiona, I just kind of want to touch on the misconception that there isn't much going on for female characters in the franchise. This isn't really important and it's a side tangent, but I've just heard some people, like, here and there criticize the franchise for having female characters that don't do anything or just serve as plot devices, etc. But, like, the first main fleshed out character we got in the franchise that had more than 2 lines of dialogue was Circus Baby. And no, I'm not counting Hand Unit, he's a useless tutorial voice that technically isn't even a character, he's kinda just there. Hell, even William Afton didn't get any sort of character display or development or fleshing out until the FNAF book came out that featured a lead female role for all of the books. Our first protagonist was a woman, our first fleshed out villain was a woman, and even the marionette, who was very important to the start of basically everything, is a girl. And Chica, who was presumably killed first, is a girl. We barely even know anything about Michael and William, like, at all. And Henry in the games doesn't even have half as much screen time as, like, Circus Baby. So I really don't get the criticism that female characters in the franchise are underutilized or only used as plot devices. Though there are a handful of female characters that are either fumbled or
No, yeah, that's pretty much it. Just fumbled, just fucking ruined. Look at Vanny. Fiona is also not really it in that game. She's some of the backbone for the things happening in this game, aside from David, who we really don't see anything of, which is a shame, since he's the precursor to all of this. Fiona was directly linked to Fall Fest. I find it so fucking irritating that all the teasers for like 2 years leading up to this game mentioned Fall Fest and the fire at Fall Fest. In Security Breach and Help Wanted 2, Fall Fest was a big deal and a lot of the games ended in flames, just as Fall Fest did. We thought this was going to be some huge pivotal moment in the timeline that changes everything. Some people were even speculating that when Henry said "a wound first inflicted upon me" was going to have something to do with Fall Fest, even though Charlotte was already bodied. A couple people out there thought we would see the birth of circus animatronics. Some people thought we were going to be playing in some cool traveling circus with early mascot suits that would have later become animatronics. But Fall Fest wasn't even in the game. You want to know the significance of Fall Fest in this game? It is mentioned once, I believe, in an audio tape, when Edwin mourns the death of his wife and he says, "You weren't meant to be there." That's all! All of this hyping up and theorizing and marketing and Easter eggs for Fall Fest, even getting set ablaze in VR multiple times, and there is no Fall Fest to be seen in this fucking game. It's all off screen, only used to explain the death of a character we don't even interact with, which was summed up in one sentence. Like, for real? Her death at Fall Fest could have easily been interchangeable with literally anything else. Like a car crash or an aneurysm on the toilet. But yeah, let's type up something that basically doesn't even matter for 2 years. The fans will love that one. And hey, right now, I could be totally wrong. Maybe this Fall Fest will have more significance in the DLC or the next game or two, but for now, it means absolutely nothing, and I don't know why you would advertise something like that for the very next game when it isn't even applicable. What an insane waste of time and energy. Oh yeah, and Fiona is a supercomputer, as you've heard me say multiple times. I have no words. Steel Wool, in my opinion, jumped the shark with a digital copy of William Afton possessing Vanny, and then they got extra airtime and jumped the fucking Sharknado in the air with this one. So, Edwin's wife is now this stupid-ass computer in his basement. She was the Mimic one, and then Edwin moved her into what would be speculated to be the Mexus machine, or maybe that is the Mimic one, I'm not sure. And here's the kicker, right? She, the Mimic 1, currently, is just a computer, and the Mimic 2 is just an endoskeleton. They are just computer programs, nothing more and nothing less. They are just ones and zeros programmed to copy the behavior of things and people around them that they perceive. But there are implications of possession and spiritual activity anyways. Why? That's literally everything that the Mimic is not. Basically, there's an audio log of Edwin trying to reach Fiona with a fucking EMF reader, you know, the stuff they use in Ghost Adventures. And as he tried to reach Fiona, her voice comes through the spirit box, which, by the way, is not how EMF readers work. But are you serious? Why the fuck did you feel the need to add that connection, like, at all? And what's more, when you encounter the Mimic in the Tiger Rock suit, there's a strangely ghostly and supernatural exchange. Like, the Tiger Rock flashes on screen the way Golden Freddy would, and he presumably teleports. Why the fuck would M2 be teleporting? Why would Fiona come through on a spirit box? It's like Steel Wool doesn't even know how to follow their own rules, or they want to bake a cake and eat it too. Having David and Fiona's spirit inhabit the Mimics completely nullifies the entire purpose of the Mimic, which is to simply copy their two personalities. But I guess that just doesn't matter because they possess them anyways? Wouldn't it be cooler if it was just sci-fi psychological horror instead of just spiritual possession again, when the whole point of the setup was that it was just sci-fi? Also, I just want to add that Rytoast at the time of this video is kind of brainstorming an idea that perhaps the Mimic acts erratically on account of agony, but that it is possessed by David or Fiona, or at least tainted by the Remnant. This would solidify the Sun and Moon being in one body, as the Mimic would be made up of Fiona's Remnant, but Edwin's agony, creating a host for the Sun and Moon together. I gotta say, very cool connection on those dots on Rytoast's behalf, but wow, did we not need that to be the case in the story. At all. Why make the Mimic a possessed vessel when instead of being spiritual horror, it could have been psychological horror by just having the Mimic copy a dead loved one? I think that's pretty creepy. We seriously did not need him to be possessed, like, at all, to any extent. Not to mention, this ham-fisted reveal of there being two Mimics was definitely just added in a last-ditch attempt to explain away Glitch Trap, but also the physical Mimic we see in Security Breach, which, may I remind you, came out of nowhere. They wanted to both explain how the digital version of the Mimic was able to be passed in the VR game, but also have a completely separate and physical Mimic in the basement of the Pizzaplex dwelling this whole time. And then we come back around to me complaining because why the fuck can we not just have one Mimic in the fucking basement of Security Breach, and then do away with the whole Glitch Trap Mimic virus bullshit and have Vanny be her own character? All of this is just all over the place, ham-fisted, in the game for the sake of being in it, and for sure doing a lot of course correcting and retconning. This era of FNAF, just like simply thinking about it, pisses me off. I will not lie to you. And that is the main reason I cannot like this game, no matter how fun it is to play. I need to take a second, bro. This is a video about bear ghosts singing songs. I need to calm down. Well, it used to be about that, but anyways. We then have the connections to the crying child, which may or not be intentional, but one thing is for certain, they absolutely include one insane connection on purpose. They decided to make a direct connection between David and his room in Secret of the Mimic with the FNAF 4 crying child, who is potentially named Dave, and his room in FNAF 4. Both rooms have that middle opening closet, both rooms have that caterpillar and purple robot toy, and there are some similarities between their lives further than the rooms. But I just want to say, if the implication is that they have some sort of connection with one another, like possibly one being a robot creation of the other, or both being the same mimic robot like Charlie kinda was, then why? And if they aren't directly related, but David has a room layout and toys similar to Dave the Crying Child, when there isn't any direct correlation between the two anyways, then why? This kind of reminds me of the newer Star Wars content where Star Wars fans say, it's like poetry, it rhymes, and they clap like Peter Griffin when faced with lazy copycat writing or just blatantly awful decisions. Like, we truly do get somehow Palpatine has returned quality writing in these newer games, and things are kind of just added or thrown in there for no reason or a stupid reason. That's why I don't like when a FNAF fan points at something like David's room in Secret of the Mimic and they're like, guys, look, it's a parallel, that's so cool! Because it's not cool. They took an interesting narrative device and assigned it to something with little to no meaning, or to a meaning that blindsides you and doesn't make very much sense. Now, I say this here in this game's franchise specifically, and I don't think the parallels used here are just parallels meant to represent a larger theme of neglectful parents, and how that can bring upon their undoing and spring evil into the franchise, etc. These connections feel like more than a narrative rhyming scheme, and more like they're trying to inject that this kid is a robot with false memories theory somewhere in there. Or at the very least insinuate that for some reason, William Afton wanted his kid to be exactly like Edwin's kid or something like that. But anyways, the rest of the similarities between David and Dave are as follows. They both carry around a plushie of their favorite mascot character. They both are described as being broken and or need fixing. Side tangent, Gregory also falls under that category and is theorized to be a robot child, and I hate that. Both of their bedrooms seem to be locked from the outside, or in David's case, barred from the outside, and both need to sneak out of a window to escape their neglectful fathers. I just think the implications of William stealing everything from Edwin, even his kid's fucking room and name, is absolutely ridiculous. If you want to know more about what the fuck I rambled about, please go watch this video by T Dreads. He's the one that drew all these connections between David and Secret of the Mimic, and Dave the Crying Child, and I believe he fits Gregory in there somewhere. Go get a coherent lesson there. I don't really know what the hell I'm talking about on that front. Now, it seems that Edwin's Manor, this house on top of the hill in Help Wanted, and Pizzaplex are all the same location. Also, I fully believe that the house on top of the hill was meant to be the FNAF 4 house, but I think this was retroactively changed to be Edwin's place. And we think that Edwin's Manor was turned into the Pizzaplex, as both have giant Freddy heads under the ground, and Security Breach Ruin has the same elevator as the manor. And I guess that would explain how the Mimic is stuck there, since it's just the same place, question mark? And Mexis as well. Anyway, that's not like a huge deal, but it gives it that small galaxy syndrome that Star Wars had, where they kept reusing the same things over and over and over again, where it just felt like such a small world. That's how I feel about Fazbear Entertainment 50 years in the future, possibly more, building their Pizzaplex on or near Murray's old mansion. That's like if Disneyland was being built on top of the hill where Walt Disney used to live. Just seems odd and super unnecessary to me. And finally, I think, let's talk about the prototype location. I really don't think we need an entire prototype location. I think the assumption we can draw from this is that it is indeed the prototype location for one of the first Freddy Fazbear Pizza places featuring animatronics instead of Springlock suits, and not an actual location itself. Which also kind of means that in this ending, when you are driving away from the manor and the Mimic gets you on the road, I guess he probably drags you out of the van and takes you on foot to this underground secret prototype location to stuff you in an animatronic suit. Seems a little extra, but I get the point. I personally don't mind witnessing the prototype animatronics in general just themselves in this game, but also do mind in a sense, since of course it's a prequel so we can expect to see them, but the only reason that I'm upset to see them is because I do not like the concept of Edwin being the one that actually created everything, or at least modeled them in the franchise, which Henry and William would later take credit for. I just absolutely despise when new companies move around and effectively change everything we know about pre-established lore that seemed set in stone about the IP before the new company took over. If it isn't broken, don't fix it. I notice a lot of fixing on Steelwell's end, and that is halfway the fault of Scott Cawthon as well for not feeding them all the information they actually needed to create a cohesive story. So there's so much course correcting and backtracking and changes made to previously established lore that either retcons what we previously knew, or just unnecessarily presented that information within a new lens that changes pretty much everything. And honestly, that isn't inherently a bad thing.
I think it was fun figuring out if FNAF 2 was actually a prequel and not a sequel, what relevance Midnight Motorist had to the franchise as a piece of lore as new games were added, bringing context from Silver Eyes into the games, finding out if there are 2 Golden Freddy ghosts and who they are, etc. But did we really have to go back to like ground -1 and effectively change everything we knew about the context and older characters of the franchise? Not to mention, this really brings down Henry's character for me a lot. Considering the bigger implication is that him and William were partners in crime and they stole Edwin's creation, if that is the correct inference that I am extrapolating from this. And no, I did not believe Henry to be a goody two-shoes, nor did I want that for his character. Henry was deeply flawed and I liked that about him, but he was at least a good man deep down, like Edwin. He was like a yin and yang type thing with William. He was the good guy, William was the bad guy, but they both had tendencies to be terrible parents. I'm sure William was more on the extreme side, like I'm willing to believe that he was abusive, but Henry, although being a workaholic and not really paying enough attention to his daughter because of his creations, was a good guy that treated the dead and missing children with respect and dignity, and I don't believe that he wouldn't offer the same to Edwin, which makes me dislike this approach to the character and lore implications. And hey, speaking of Edwin, doesn't his character kinda just sound a lot like Henry in the Silver Eyes? Remember when Henry created an endoskeleton that ended up just murking him in his own home when he hadn't spent enough time with his child? It just feels like we're hitting the same one note over and over and over with these characters. This is the FNAF character equivalent to Vivziepop only writing exclusively about daddy issues. And I just think it's a cool little character detail for them to both kind of betray their family while Henry at least has a limit and a breaking point in which the deeds of William swallow him whole throughout the rest of his life until he brings an end to it. And now I just kind of don't feel bad for him, and I think it took the fun out of his character for me since it leaned too much towards the other side, when I feel like previously his morality was nicely set in the middle somewhere. I think just William and Henry being distant and neglectful parents, yet being complete opposites in their moral compass and where they want to take their work is rhyming enough. Any more of the whole neglectful father focusing on robots until their beloved child dies, and it just feels like the whole Vivziepop daddy issue writing scheme over and over, and it gets stale really fast for me. Alright, I think I pretty much hit all the notes that I wanted to, which is more than I can say for me playing the Deltarune rhythm game and getting a C rank because I accidentally tried playing over my real guitar skills on the X and Y keys. Overall, what do you think? I think Secret of the Mimic is a technically really good feeling game and fun to play, and it has a good self-contained story. Though as a bigger puzzle piece in the cog of a FNAF machine, I think it absolutely bombs. That's what this video is about. It's terrible as a lore piece, so please just keep that little picture frame in your mind. If this were just its own separate game away from any sort of FNAF canon or even in a new continuity like how Transformers has like 50 different timelines going on unrelated to one another, I think it would be really, really good. Granted, it would basically still be like a Poppy Playtime reskin, but it would have been fun, and the story would have been the best aspect about it if it were its own self-contained universe. But overall, what do you think? I know there are many different types of FNAF fans with vastly differing opinions, so I want to know where you lay on that spectrum. But also, discourse in this fandom can get more heated than American politics if you say something like Bonnie and Freddy are a weird couple to put together canonically. So be respectful, but do go off on a passionate tangent if needed. I would love to hear everyone else's take on the things that I talk about. I'm going into this video with raw emotion, so I really do expect some people to think that what I'm saying is ridiculous or stupid, or they just absolutely hate my take, and that's okay because I hate other people's takes in this fandom as well. I also avoided watching pretty much any other videos about this game. I think the only one I watched was half of Fiznom's video, and I just wanted to avoid watching anybody else's videos on them because I wanted to avoid bias swaying me and whatnot. So maybe even give me something that I missed or something that you would like me to talk about in the future. As you can see, I'm kind of new to this thing, and I think mostly the content I want to do moving forward are FNAF videos and this kind of video essay character stills format. Though my next video will probably not be nearly as long. Anyway though, I've been Jack Flowers, and I hope you have a wonderful day, superstar. Bye bye.